Welcome back to Agreeable Disagreements. Sorry, we've been kind of on a hiatus for the last 3 weeks, but this is a podcast where two friends with differing political ideologies come together and have a polite debate about it. I feel like I do the intro differently each time, but I'm
But
just now realizing that maybe I should get a script.
see, but variation is the spice of life.
That's
So
true.
I will take slightly different every time than wrote, Welcome to Agreeable Disagreements. I'm Andrew, and this is Cameron, and we disagree on stuff. Man, yeah, I'd rather
Yeah.
you mix it up a little bit than every time.
Actually, I kind of want you to do that as the intro from now on, exactly how you just did it.
Welcome to Agreeable Disagreements.
Oh, we don't need to do it again.
Or I could do it like Ben Stein and Ferris Bueller. Andrew. Andrew. Andrew.
Fry.
Is that a Futurama joke that you just made?
No, that's an actual name that Ben Stein says in Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Oh, you're right. It's been so long since I've seen that movie.
Yeah.
You would think for someone who is named after one of the main characters that I would know that movie inside and out.
Wait, is that really where your name comes from?
That is 100% where my parents got my name.
Oh my
They were
gosh.
watching Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and they were like, Cameron, that's a good name. Yeah.
And then they spelled it wrong.
That's also a funny story. You see, so I was 2 weeks late, and so I was a C-section baby.
Okay.
And the story my dad says is, we spelled your name differently so that you would be different. So you'd be unique. Now you're wondering if that's the story.
Mission accomplished.
Right. And if you're asking, you might be thinking, if that's the story, why did I include the detail about the C-section? Here's why. Because my mom's story is she was really high on those post-C-section drugs.
Okay.
And my dad said, hey, why don't you just take the E out of there? Be a little different. And then she did. And then like a few months later, they're at home. They're filling out the paperwork or something, or my dad sees my mom writing my name out, something like that. My dad's like, why are you spelling it like that? She's like, that's his name. You told me to spell it like that. And he's like, what? No, I did no such thing. And he'll deny it to this day. I don't know who to believe, but either way, I got a weird name.
Oh my god, that's hilarious. At least it's not as bad as I think Oprah's parents. They meant to spell, I think it's Orpha, which is
yeah, it's a biblical
Orpah.
name in the Old Testament. Yeah.
But they flipped around the P and the H.
Wow.
Or
the
some,
R and the
something.
P. The R and the P.
Yeah,
like
the
that.
R and the P. Yeah. But yeah, it would be pretty embarrassing if my parents couldn't spell Andrew. So.
Well, so on a similar note, my mom also has a weird name story.
Mm-hmm.
So my mom was born, and her parents named her Melissa Ann.
Okay.
My grandfather signs that birth certificate with his wife, my grandmother. He goes off to work. My grandmother's sister, Ruby, comes in. I don't know if it was sister or aunt, cousin, something like that. There's a favorite relative, favorite aunt, something named Ruby. She comes to visit. She goes, Sharon, that's not a Melissa Ann. That's a Kelly Jo if I ever saw one. And then left. And then walked out. All right? And my grandmother was
just
like...
left them there sitting in that.
Right. And so my grandmother was like, it does look like a Kelly Jo. And redid the birth certificate. So my grandfather went to work with a Melissa Ann and came home from work to a Kelly Jo.
Oh my god. You know what? A similar thing actually happened to my dad. My dad's name is David. But for about 3 days, his name was Thomas. And his sister, who's 14 years older than him, hated the name Thomas. So she ran away until they changed his name.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that is crazy.
I don't know if she actually ran away or if she threatened to run away, but that is the family lore of why my dad is not named Thomas.
Wow. You know, my brother, my name's from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. My brother's name is
Right.
from a 90s TV show called Parker Lewis Can't Stop.
Oh wow. Okay.
And then my sister is the only one not to have a TV name. Hers is just
Okay.
my grandmother's names smushed together.
Oh, I thought it was after Lauren Graham from Gilmore Girls.
Oh, yeah, because, if my family's known for anything, it's their devotion to the Gilmore Girls.
Hey, that's a good show.
I will say, my wife will watch that show, and I'll be like, oh, it's Gilmore Girls. And then I'll walk by and be like, huh.
That's exactly how I got put onto it because my sister would watch it all the time. And then one spring break, I didn't have anything to do. And so I was just hanging out with her watching Gilmore Girls. And after that, like, ever since then, and I was like 11, I think, at the
Oh my
time.
gosh.
But ever since then, I have loved Gilmore Girls. It is a fantastic show, and it's got Carole King in it.
I know that if I sat down with my wife and sat through it, I would probably like it.
Yeah, but you have to go in with fresh eyes. You can't force it on yourself.
I mean, I've got such a short-term memory with media that's not science fiction or fantasy that I probably would be just fine. But
Yeah.
ugh. Anyway, because
that's my hot take is that Gilmore Girls is a great show.
So speaking of hot takes, because we've been gone for personal reasons, like I went on vacation, then I had to move, and Andrew had some family stuff going on.
Grandpa die.
Right, very sad. Way to one up me there too. By the way.
Okay, It's not like I planned that. Also, I'm pretty sure everyone listening to this, except for like your family members, probably already knows.
Probably.
So, but yeah, we've had stuff.
And because we've had stuff, even though some big things have happened in the news, right? We just had a bunch of bombshell Supreme Court rulings. We just haven't had the time to prepare that we normally have. And so
we've had a lot of bombshell Supreme Court rulings. I almost feel guilty that we're not talking about those.
Yeah, but you know what? We can talk about them next week.
That's true.
But because we haven't had the time to prepare, we were thinking we'd mix it up, maybe have a little bit of fun here, and give our hot takes. Not all of them, but we're going to give you some political, maybe a couple not political, silly hot takes that are things that we think, but also might be controversial to think.
Exactly.
And I will start.
So
I will start really quick.
Start.
I'm going to start really quick. I think there is a superior race, and I think it is the Indy 500.
No.
It's the Indy 500.
You have to warn me before you make a joke like that. Also, you're wrong. It's the Kentucky Derby.
The Kentucky Derby.
At the Indy 500, you don't get to dress up fancy and drink mint juleps and say mint julep with a Savannah accent. I'm sorry.
That is true.
It's just objectively better.
We can decide if we want to cut that out or not. If you're going to edit, I'll leave it up to you.
Oh, I want to leave it in, but also I'm so concerned if we do. Was my objection quick enough?
Oh yeah, you were like, wait, no. I could just see you're like, do I even know this person? Like this look in your eyes. I got that from a TikTok I saw where some guy was like, all right, welcome to day number 3 of ranking all the races. We're gonna look now at this race, which I think is a little subpar than others. Some people like it, some people don't. Anyway, the Daytona 500.
Yeah.
Something like that.
That's so problematic.
Look, I am comfortable enough in my own reputation and my own actions that I know people are going to hear that and be like, oh, he's going to say a joke. At least the people I know.
I knew that it was not serious, but what I'm worried about is does it carry over to listeners who don't know us?
It will now.
I mean, yeah, hopefully. If you haven't gotten by this point that was totally just all hyperbole and sarcasm, then I don't know what you're doing
I will
listening to
say, as
this.
someone who lives slightly outside of Indianapolis, that I have to say that the Indy 500 is the superior race for race cars.
Can we just stop using the term superior race? Just like something about hearing that just it feels icky.
All right.
Um, anyway,
Andrew's actually going to start with the hot takes. I just wanted to spring that on him to make him
yeah,
squirm.
no, well done, mission accomplished.
All right, go ahead. What's your first hot take, Andrew?
Now I'm resisting the urge to say a fake but offensive one. Um, okay, but really, my first hot take is that I think there should be a civics test for as a prerequisite to serving in a public office. Um, Maybe not mayor, but I think definitely like state legislature and also higher offices than that in the federal government. My idea is similar to, and I'm not entirely sure how the citizenship test works, but I think it would be something similar to that. I think you'd have a battery of 200 or 300 questions, and I think for this one, I think it should be a little bit more strict than the citizenship test. Um, so I think that they should maybe even be like long form questions, but basic information. And from that battery of, however many questions, you get asked 10 of them. And if you get, I think for the citizenship test, it's like if you get 6 correct, then you pass.
Okay. Okay, so I had some questions there, but then you answered them as you went along. So, because you said it's going to be like a 200 or 300 question test, and I was like, whoa there.
No. That's just the battery that they can select. So you essentially get the questions beforehand. It's just only 10 of those are going to be asked. And that's why I think like long form answers would be better, because you still would have to demonstrate a fundamental understanding of the subject material, even though it's just 10 questions, if it's long form.
So I to some degree like this idea, just because I've seen a number of politicians, local, federal, everywhere in between, who clearly do not understand the basic concepts of the Constitution.
I mean, we can just say Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene. We can call them out directly.
But it's not just Republicans, right? Because how many Democrat or liberal policies get struck down by the Supreme Court, even if it's a moderate or liberal court, right? So like, I'm not just saying this strictly goes for the wackos, right? There's a lot of people who will fundamentally say this needs to happen. This is a law that we need to enact that goes directly against certain parts of the Constitution. And that's why we have a balanced system. That's why we have checks and balances.
That's why we're supposed to have a balanced system.
Right. That's why we're supposed to. But I do think some of that could be reduced if we did have some amount of a test. My problem here, though, comes in with the idea of how much is that going to reduce the pool of people? Because part of the beauty of having our system is that anybody can become an elected official. You could be a soybean farmer in Maxwell, Indiana, which is like some small podunk town that's got less than 100 people out here near where I live.
Right.
And you could run for House of Representatives, Senate, President.
Yeah, you can run. Are you going to win?
Well, you might. I mean, Greg Pence. But, it's my idea here. My problem is that you're going to narrow down some of these people. And my concern is that if the test is too hard, you're only going to end up with lawyers in office. And that has pros and cons. True. I think we already have majority members of Congress are people who have law experience.
Well, yeah, sorry. I don't think that that's any more true than it would be right now. I think specifically, and I know I was joking earlier, but specifically, I think it would keep people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, who have absolutely no understanding of any of the policies that they're, debating on in the House or on or committee members uh, deciding policy. Um, I think it would keep people like them who um, at least from in Lauren Boebert's case, I think just got elected because she had powerful friends. Um,
See, but how
which
many
that's a
people? I mean, I know Lowen Bobert is a contemporary example, but how many other people, Republican or Democrat, does that apply to?
I think quite a bit,
I
and
mean,
it would at least ensure that there was a base level of knowledge of how the country works
right. So I mean, like,
and what demographics make up the country,
yeah.
what are the factual things that we know about the country and governance and those kinds of things, because honestly I don't think that enough of the federal and state representatives really have a good enough grasp of that.
I agree. I 100% agree with you there that we have too many people in power who don't understand, and too many people in power who are there not because of their own achievements, but because of their connections, right? I mean, how many
Mhm.
Kennedys have been in office just because they're a Kennedy,
Yeah,
right? And we now have an anti-vax Kennedy running, and he's kind of getting a lot of attention, and mm, right.
yeah, that's an issue for another day.
Yeah, I remember being like, "Oh, cool, a Kennedy's running. That would be oh, his platform is
Oh,
wacko."
oh no.
No, but he does a lot of push-ups every day. That's impressive.
Yeah.
But I do think that you're right in that a civics test would definitely help narrow that down. Um, and I think that would probably be most beneficial at a federal level, even if it's just a basic understanding of how the system works. It doesn't necessarily have to be all these history questions. I don't think we need to have all these questions about, you know, Supreme Court cases in the past and different laws that have passed. But
I think certain things like I think you should know the basic uh rulings and arguments made for like Roe versus Wade or Marbury versus Madison or the Dred Scott case, like landmark cases that we learned in high school, if not before that. I think those are essential um, for uh, elected officials to know, because that those things still have repercussions today.
so I
I mean,
will,
we've talked
yeah.
about like Marbury versus Madison on this
Mm-hmm.
podcast, and that's still 200 and 50 years later, that's still relevant.
That's fair. And I will agree with you in the sense that there may be some cases that dictate how government functions. Um,
Hmm.
but I would push back just in the sense that some of those cases are only important because they're contemporary, they're currently relevant, and they may become not relevant 50, 70 years down the line.
Well, yeah, but
So,
then you change the question battery.
right, but then you have to worry about changing it. And we all know how quick Congress or the government is to update certain things.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah,
So,
that's a fair criticism.
my point is, I would think those questions would really benefit the public and the politicians if they are about procedures. If they're about, okay, how does a bill become a law? What is required to get something accomplished in the House of Representatives? What do the different committees do? How are the committees decided? Things like that.
Right. Or if you did expand it beyond that, things that aren't going to change relevance.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think part of it is, yeah, just knowing how the system works. But I think the other part of it is kind of like even if you do ask like an abstract um, question like Like, what was the battle that Francis Scott Key was writing about when he wrote the Star Spangled Banner?
Right.
Like, knowing that, I think, shows your ability to at least seek out information
Sure.
instead of just, thinking that you have all the information that you're going to need and you don't have to do any research. And then you get elected without having done any research and you start, saying just absolutely insane things as an elected official.
Yeah, but the thing is, how much of that is strategy to get media attention and how much of it is sincere? And I'm not saying I
I
know,
mean, yeah, that
but
that that could be, but I think a lot more of it's sincere than I think a lot of it is I think there's a little of column A, a little of column B,
sure.
but I think a little bit of column A is being claimed that it's column B because they're embarrassed that they actually didn't know.
Yeah, I could see that.
You know.
Well, I think we've exhausted this one. Should we move on to the next
Yeah.
one? All right.
Yeah.
Which I know we talked about these. We just mentioned what
Yeah.
our hot takes were beforehand. Which one do you want me to do first? The first one I mentioned or the second one I mentioned that said your blood was going to boil?
Ooh.
Let's do that one. All right.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do that one.
I'm going to crack my neck and my knuckles. Oh, I don't know if the
Getting
microphone
into
picked that
fighting
up.
mode.
Oh, yeah.
It did on my end.
Okay. So,
God,
this
can I
is...
do that? Okay.
Ooh, yeah, nice. Okay, so this is a two-parter because it's the same.
There's like 5% of our audience that's just immediately turned it off.
If you made it through the knuckle cracks, you're a true fan. All right, so
Yeah.
mine is a two-parter. It's the same concept, but I'm using it two examples.
Mhm.
When looking solely at their political achievements, policies, we're not looking at personal life. We're not looking at speeches. We're just looking at the actual laws that they enacted or vetoed or struck down, whatever. Obama was a better president than Republicans are willing to admit, but also a worse president than Democrats are willing to admit. And Trump was a worse president than Republicans like to admit, and a better president than Democrats like to admit.
See, I agree with 3 out of the 4.
Okay, which 3?
I think the 3. I think he was better president than Republicans like to admit. That's a given. I
Sure.
loved Obama.
Yeah.
I also think that he had some definite mistakes in
Sure.
his administration. I think for sure Trump is a worse president than the Republicans would like to admit.
But you don't think he's better than Democrats would admit?
No. I think he's just as bad as the Democrats want to admit, and likely even worse.
All right.
And that's just looking at policy.
Sure. So here is an article from Politico called 30 Things Donald Trump Did as President You Might Have Missed.
Okay.
First one is he didn't repeal Obamacare, he accidentally bolstered it. Now I won't give him that one because that's an accident.
That's an accident. He
Right.
didn't intentionally do that, so I don't feel like he gets credit for it.
He had a very strong focus on national security. And
yeah, I don't think that was necessary.
Really? I think it is no coincidence that Russia invaded Ukraine after Trump was no longer in office.
I think that I don't know if it was necessarily a coincidence, but I definitely think that I think it would have been worse if they'd done it when Trump was president.
I don't think so. See, here's the thing. Like I know that Trump gets a lot of flack for being close to Putin. But I don't know that I would, as if I were president, I don't know that I would have chummed up to Putin as much as Trump did. But there is something to be said for the international relations we had with Russia at that time versus today. And even like all things come with a cost and all things have a benefit. There's nothing on this earth that is purely bad or purely good. And I think that there were some definite downsides to Trump having all those conversations with Putin, but I don't think it was Trump's in Putin's pocket like all the Democrats say he was. You know,
I don't think Trump knew that he was in Putin's pocket. I think he was incredibly susceptible to manipulation by Putin. And I think that that's why Putin didn't want to make such a bold move. I think that when Trump was president, as you know, invading and annexing another country, I think Putin was hoping to get more out of his relationship with Trump, but it eventually found Trump so inept that he
sure.
realized, oh, this is a burned asset, basically. And then once Biden became president, was like, okay, this is my last ditch effort for, you know, uh, conquest or whatever it is that Putin wants.
So I think you're right about Putin. I don't think you're right about the Trump or Biden thing. I think it was, oh, if I do this during Trump, Trump's kind of a wild card. And even though we've been talking and been kind of friends, he might go nuts on me. And let's be honest, Trump had that possibility.
Yeah,
Biden, he's got some good things that I like about him. I don't think that policy with international governments is one of
yeah.
them. I
He's
don't
not going to use the nuclear option unless that's,
Well, and I don't
a,
think Trump would either, but I think Trump would have been more quick to
I
be
don't
like
know.
boots on the ground in Ukraine. And I think Biden has been more about funding. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's two different ways to accomplish the same goal. Um, but I feel like with Trump, you have a little bit more irrationality. What's going to happen? Is he going to invade me? And sometimes that's the only thing keeping people at bay, right? Sometimes that's the only thing keeping people like
Yeah,
Putin from doing stuff because you don't know what the reaction's going to be. Biden is a very predictable person when it comes to things like that. You know exactly what he's going to do. Sanctions.
well, I mean, I think he's done other things like, I mean, authorizing the sale of ordnance and weapon systems and stuff to Ukraine.
Yeah, but what's better,
Uh,
giving them some weapons or giving them soldiers?
um, I mean, I think that depends on your viewpoint. I would say
That's
giving
fair.
them weapons because it's not our war, and we're not, especially with our involvement in NATO and
Yeah,
everything. It's not feasible for us to put boots on the ground. Now, it is feasible for us to supply Ukraine with weapons because I know that we've gotten in hot water with that before, specifically the Mujahideen in Afghanistan in the 80s.
hmm
Um, but I think Ukraine is a much more reliable ally than the Mujahideen, and I think that Zelensky is a much better leader. Um, and I think our the risk that we're taking by kind of repeating history by supplying weapons instead of supplying troops,
sure.
I think with Ukraine is a lot lower.
So
Um,
to rein it back in just a little bit, though,
yeah,
let's talk more about reasons why Trump wasn't as bad. He made it easier to prosecute financial crimes like money laundering and closed some tax loopholes, which he
ooh,
took advantage of leading up to his
yeah.
presidency.
How did that work out for him?
Well, that was kind of his campaign, right? His campaign was, I know exactly what everybody's doing because I'm doing it. And the only reason I'm doing it is because everybody else who's in the government benefits from it and made it legal. Or their friends
Right.
who fund them benefit from it. So they made it legal. So why are you mad at me for doing something that they said I can legally do? Right? So then he comes
Because you're a
in.
bad person for doing it in the first
So
place.
there's the moral argument to it, yes. But he did make it
But
easier
okay,
to
yeah, just talk
prosecute.
about policy. But here's the thing: was he making it? And I think here's the crux of the question: how are we defining a better president? Are we
So
talking about more effective at enacting policies, doing better for the American people, or having the intention to fix broken things, because I think, and again, I don't know what specifically he repealed that made it easier to prosecute.
So it's not that he repealed anything; it's that he added legislation into other works.
Sure, yeah, sure. So I'm not sure specifically what is all involved with that,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think it was to protect the American people. I think it was to kind of screw over people that he had some vendetta against.
I think
I think that's a
there's
much more
definitely
likely.
some truth to that, but I do think it is to. I mean, here's the thing: if you're going
I don't
to
think he did it for the good of anyone else, anyone besides him.
see, but
Trump
again,
doesn't do stuff like that.
but again, you're letting some personal feelings get into this. I think, and this is why I'm saying like Democrats underestimate Trump because he has this persona, yes, but there's the Trump that everybody sees on TV, and then there's the Trump that actually did some things, and a lot of times they cross over. I will be honest, a lot of times they cross over, but I don't. I think what this came from, based on the rhetoric I saw from Trump and his administration, was there's two ways to increase your monetary income with the government. You either raise taxes or you close tax loopholes. And he chose to try and close those loopholes because if you close the loopholes, fewer people are getting away with not paying their taxes and you're getting more income, right? Now, I could go on for a few other things.
He also did one last thing before we move on to the next one. He did also increase taxes for the lowest percent of Americans who already couldn't afford their taxes.
And this would fall into reasons why Republicans think he's better than he was.
Sure.
Because I will agree with you. I will agree with you there. And I do think, I'm not trying to say Trump is the best president ever. I want to be clear. I'm just saying he's better than Democrats give him credit for.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, as you point out, Republicans tend to saviorize him. Like he's the savior of politics, and he's very clearly not.
He's almost their messiah, which is concerning.
I mean, yeah, but I also remember after George W. Bush, Democrats spoke almost the same about President Obama. He's coming to save us. He's coming to save us from the Republicans.
Was a very good president. I think he was very good. I do have some issues with things that he did. I don't think that the bailout went the way that, the progressives wanted.
Yeah. I agree with
counting myself in that. I also, one of the biggest things that I have a problem with is, do you know about the Operation Fast and Furious?
No, but now I want to.
It is, from my understanding, it was a large amount of firearms that were purposefully,
I know
purposefully lost track of.
Yeah.
In order to track them back to like cartels and illegal owners, and then they just ended up they were supposed to fake losing track of them, but then they actually did lose track of them, and so they just gave a bunch of high capacity assault rifles to criminals. And I don't know if I have the specifics right, but I mean it's in general that was I think that was a big blunder of his career.
So I mean that's a big one. I think both of those are really good examples as to why he's not as good a president as Democrats like to say he is. Because I see a lot of, even today, when we're in hindsight, we tend to look at just the good of presidents a lot of times. I mean, I've had some Democrats start saying things about George W. Bush that even I'm like, whoa, tone it down. He's not that great. Just because of where we are now.
Just because in comparison.
Right.
Yeah. I have to remind myself sometimes that he started a war that killed thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians.
But on a similar note, right? So Obama continued that war to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
And he ordered, do you know about the Kunduz hospital strike? Where he ordered an attack on a hospital and with shaky information, and it turned out that the shaky information wasn't true.
Yeah.
And killed 42 people. And it's a children's hospital. He had more
drone strikes than any other president, and extrajudiciary drone strikes in countries that we were not at war with, like Yemen.
Right. Right.
that part I don't agree with, but also look at what he inherited.
So,
I
but
think
if he,
there are definitely some mistakes.
I don't like the look what they inherited argument
Well, I mean,
to a
it's not
degree.
it doesn't absolve them. It's
Right.
just it's a fact that does need to be considered.
Right. And I agree that you get given a crappy situation, you can only do so much with it, but at the same time, you can still do something about it. And but all that being said, I will say that Obama, well, sorry, before I get to that, another thing I don't like about President Obama is those kids in cages that Trump got blamed for were built by
Hmm.
President Obama's administration. Right? Those were,
Yeah,
I'm not sure that President Obama was great with the border issue, but I will
yeah,
say I think he was more in touch with the basic American citizen than anybody else that I've seen as president in a
yeah.
long time.
I would agree with that.
I think he was, and this comes to personality issues. I think he had a better personality than several of the presidents we've had in my lifetime.
Oh yeah,
All of them. But I think,
I would say all of them.
um, I will say, I think he did good work with student loans and financial aid, which
Mhm.
expanded underneath him. I think he was good with social programs for low income American citizens.
Yeah,
And I like what he did with what's it called? Climate change. That's the word. Climate change.
yeah.
Because that's an issue I
He
think.
signed the Paris Agreement, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think that
Yeah.
Republicans downplay that because, and this comes to an issue more of what affects them directly, what affects different people directly. Republicans
Yeah,
tend to
what
be
are issues that they care about, really?
exactly, and Republicans are more concerned. A lot of them are more. If we look at the demographics, Republicans tend to more so be made up of middle class, blue collar, which are going to be more concerned with how much it costs to fill up your car to get to work than other demographics are going to be. And so,
Mhm.
the cost of gas is a huge thing for Republicans, and that's a huge point that they look at. But the overall bigger picture, I think, is something that Republicans tend to ignore because of that immediate problem of having to pay more for your gas.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think Obama, when it comes to energy, had great policies,
Yeah,
especially with
I
like
think so too.
alternative energies.
I also think it's worth noting that he was extremely embattled when he was a president. So I think that
He had a
he,
supermajority for part of his term.
yeah, but that still, I mean, look at the tantrums that people can throw to just throw a monkey wrench into the works and how effective it is. I think that they were, especially, when John Boehner was, um, Speaker of the House. I think that was probably the most. Um, this may not be accurate, but from my perspective, I think that's the most gridlocked that Congress has ever been, and and a large part of why the Republican Party has just become the party of no is because
Ooh. Okay, keep
of
going. Keep going.
everything that happened, of just how things changed over Obama's presidency from, these two groups that can, work on bipartisan issues, but maybe disagree on the logistics and the financials and stuff like that, to this dichotomy that we have now where one group, and you can argue, or not you specifically, but somebody can argue all they want that the Republicans aren't just the party of no. They are.
I'm not going to say that the
It's
Republicans aren't the party of no. I'm going to say it's both ways, depending on who's in power. Because there was when we had the healthcare bills going on, right? When we had the healthcare bill issue, the Republicans and Democrats couldn't agree on anything. Or no, it was budget. It was a budget issue. So the
yeah,
Republic,
okay, yeah.
yeah, under Trump, there was
You're talking about the one that where uh,
the
Joe
Republicans.
Manchin and Kristen Sinema were really dragging their feet.
I don't remember that, but I'm not positive about that. What I'm getting at is there
Okay.
was one point where the Republicans said, fine, we will do the exact budget that they just said. So they, like, the Democrats proposed budget A, Republicans said no, proposed budget B, Democrats said no, Democrats said budget C, Republicans said no, Republicans went back to budget A and said, yeah, we can do that. And Democrats said no, just because it came from the Republicans. Even though it was word for word, it was the exact same thing.
Okay.
Right.
I'm gonna have to look into that because I don't know if that was. If I'm remembering correctly, that was the one where Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, who, at least at the time, were Democrats, but I think it was them. But really, they were not acting. They were not like they were opposed to all party lines at that point.
I mean, that could be true. I'm not going to say that's not true because I don't know. But I remember that being in the headlines where the Republicans passed the exact same. They tried to pass the exact same thing that Democrats had said a couple of weeks prior. But because it came from
Yeah.
the Republicans, the Democrats said no.
Yeah. Should we move on to our next one?
Let's move on. Yeah. Each of us have one more political hot take that we're going to share. But first, we have a couple non-political hot takes we're going to share. And mine is all Star Wars is good Star Wars. Granted, some of it is more good and some of it is less good. And yes, I know that there are correct vocabulary terms for them. I am, after all, an English teacher. But I'm going to say more good and less good. All Star Wars is good. Some is more good. Some is less good.
Yeah, I would actually say I kind of agree with this. I think that, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of problems with, with the prequels. There's a lot of problems with the Skywalker saga. I think I think that the Clone Wars, the TV series, gets a lot of flack for being a little bit campy,
But
but
that
it's
show
a
is so
solid
good.
show.
Oh my
It's
gosh, I
a
love that
good show. And I think what's the other one? Rebels.
Rebels. Rebels, and then there's also the Bad
Rebels
Batch.
is less good. Well, yeah,
You shut your mouth.
Rebels is less good. Rebels is not as good as Clone Wars. That's just 100% fact. But
You will not besmirch the name of Kanan Jarrus in my house. You are not in my house, so you can't besmirch him. But no, Kanan, please, come on. So many feelings.
I'm sorry. I still watched Rebels. I still enjoyed Rebels. Resistance we can just completely disregard because that doesn't count.
Sure.
But I mean, I think that in any franchise where that's so beloved, I think the same thing with Rings of Power. When you have a franchise that's really beloved and is so many people feel like kind of a parasympathetic ownership over that.
Sure.
You're gonna have people be disappointed. But I thought Rings of Power was okay. I definitely didn't like how much they deviated from the actual, source material compiled by Christopher Tolkien. But
sure.
I think all in all, they made a good show out of what they had. And I think that, the prequels for Star Wars did a relatively good job. I think episode 1, meaning Phantom Menace, I think that was kind of a swing and a miss. But Clone Wars and Revenge of the Sith, I think were two solid additions to the franchise.
Yeah.
And I think likewise, the Skywalker saga did a fairly good job of continuing on with this storyline.
So I will say that when I go to see any movie, my number one question coming out is, was I entertained? And that could be that's going to be different things for different movies, right? I'm going to go to a historical period drama, and I'm not going to be looking for explosions and lightsabers and all that stuff, right? I want drama. That's what I'm watching,
Yeah.
right? I'm watching a biopic about King George and the King's Speech. I want it to be engaging. I'm going to go
I mean,
watch
but
like
you can't deny it would have been a way better movie if Jeffrey Rush had had a lightsaber.
yes, that is true.
Think of how much quicker Colin Firth could have like gotten that thing. Like he didn't even need to do the whole thing where he just said fuck a bunch of times. He could have just pulled out a lightsaber and be like, "Stop stuttering, or else."
Wow. Okay. The first
That
bleep of
is
the
not.
show, maybe.
Yeah. Sorry.
It's okay. It's relevant to the movie. Um,
Yeah.
no, it's. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it.
That's a
No,
hilarious scene, by the way.
it is. It's great. I've seen the movie. It's fantastic. No, but like, I'm not gonna go see a Fast and Furious movie and expect to have the most compelling storyline, right? I'm gonna
Like
go
some really nuanced philosophical, like,
right. You watch Fast and Furious for cars and explosions, and depending on
yeah,
who you are, scantily clad women.
yeah.
I
Well,
never was
and
into that kind of
family.
stuff in the movies either. Or
You
and
watch it
family.
for
It's
the
all about family.
family.
Oh my gosh. I don't I don't actually like the Fast and Furious movies. I haven't seen one. I keep seeing the trailers or I'll see clips and I'm like, no. Anyway, this isn't about Fast and
So
Furious.
hold on, my friend Andre, who is the front man for Halcyon Club, who does our
Yeah.
intro, he is obsessed with the Fast and Furious movies. So if he's listening, he's gonna be so thrilled that we're talking about this right now.
So then I
Anyway,
like
yeah,
what you said
continue.
about Clone Wars. Clone Wars, great show. It starts like I watched the first season, the first episode, and
Yeah,
I was like,
it takes a
this is
while.
yeah, well, because what happened is they started making it for kids, and then they realized who was actually watching it, so they
Yeah,
changed it.
yeah,
And I think that speaks to the bigger issue of Star Wars and why everybody hates it. What I've seen a pattern where the generation that grew up with the original trilogy hated the prequels because
yeah.
they weren't the original trilogy. But our
Some
generation,
of them hated Return of the Jedi just because of the
also true.
Ewoks.
Also true. So then you get, but it's because it's different than what they had when they grew up, right? So then
Mhm.
you have our generation who kind of grew up with both, right? We grew up with the original trilogy and the prequels came out in the theaters, and
Yeah.
whether you like Phantom Menace or not, I think it's a great movie. But swing or a
I,
miss
I'm
or
still
not,
entertained by it. I still have very fond memories of it,
see,
but
but that's the thing. You have fond memories of it. That's the point I'm getting at because
yeah,
the older generation came into it and they were like, "This isn't what I had growing up," so they didn't have those fond memories of it. Now our generation goes to see the sequels, the newest trilogy, and we're like, "This isn't what I had growing up." But the
yeah,
kids who are watching it, as a middle school teacher, the kids who I've had who go to see these movies love them, right? And
yeah.
so
I
Star
love them.
Wars, I think they're great too. But I've noticed that Star Wars is hated by the people who liked the previous series.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I would say that's accurate because
that's the pattern.
our generation really loves the prequels,
Yeah,
and and I mean I do too, but not to the extent that I think a lot of our peers do.
sure,
Um, can I give you my real hot take though on
sure.
this?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think A New Hope is better than Empire. And that's the end of the podcast, folks.
Yeah, just roll
Cameron is
credits right
Cameron
there.
has refused to talk to me.
And I'm the one who made a superior race joke at the beginning.
Yeah.
All right,
No,
what's your
I personally enjoy A New Hope more than I enjoy Empire.
I think I can see it. I like Empire better because it's different. It's not
Mhm.
every time. You don't always go see a movie and the bad guys win. And that's
Yeah,
something that sets Empire apart. Is it the bad guys win. And that's
yeah,
what makes it so good is people came in thinking, "Oh yeah, they just won. They just destroyed the Death Star." And now they're like, "Oh crap. That was only the beginning. Things just got real."
yeah. I guess I didn't think about it that way. I just think that I think A New Hope is a perfect movie. I
Sure.
mean
It's got a solid beginning, middle, end, hero's journey.
yeah. I mean it perfectly follows Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, and that's, I mean, by design. But also, I can't think of a single flaw in that movie and how groundbreaking it was.
Right.
I just don't think the Empire lives up to that in the same way. And I think that from a like from an academic viewpoint, I think A New Hope is a better movie than Empire.
I see what you mean. I see what you mean. And in the interest of time, because
Right, we could do
I
a
could
whole new
Sheldon
thing.
Cooper this whole thing for 3 hours, and I'm not going
We'll
to.
have to do another like special episode just based on this question.
Oh, maybe we can do that for the next May the 4th. We'll
We
do a
could,
Star Wars only. Anyway,
yeah.
what's your not political hot take? Let's just no segue.
Uh,
Move it on.
my not political hot take is that it's not aioli, it's just mayonnaise that you put stuff in. Aioli is a completely different thing. I'm actually gonna look up the etymology.
Oh, that's a good idea. Aioli etymology.
Yeah, we
It's
might need
French
to.
for garlic and oil.
Yes. So I
Or
think
not
it
French,
actually,
Provençal, whatever Provençal is.
yeah, uh, yeah. So it's a southern French dialect, from what I understand.
Okay. Yeah,
But
yeah.
it means, I think, io, which means garlic, and then the oli part means oil. That's all aioli is. You can get occasion like different regional variations. Some of them allow for egg yolk, but primarily what it is an emulsification of just garlic and olive oil,
Look at
and
you
that's
using
it.
words like emulsification.
Hey, I studied food science for 2.5 years.
I keep forgetting
Um,
about that. You're right. So
yeah,
if
I didn't
anyone should
graduate, so
so if we should trust anybody about aioli, it's you.
yes, I'm the world's foremost expert on mayonnaise. Um,
That is not something I think anybody wants to be the world's foremost expert on.
is that a brand new sentence that I just said?
I'm the world's foremost expert on mayonnaise. Yeah, that
Yeah.
I don't think anybody has ever said that combination of words seriously.
Eh,
At
I don't
least.
know. You go to enough dive bars, you'll hear anything. Um,
Again, I'll have to trust your opinion on that, or your
yeah.
word on that.
But I don't understand the need for. I mean, I know mayonnaise, like mayonnaise gets a bad rap. I didn't like mayonnaise for a long time growing up. Um, but I mean, mayonnaise gets a bad rap for being like low class. But just because you put some flavored shit into it doesn't make it this whole other thing.
That should be the cold
It's
open preview. Just because you put some other.
yeah. No, it's just and garlic aioli, that's redundant on its face. And
It's like
that's the most it's like ATM machine.
yeah, or 10 a.m. in the morning.
Yes. Yeah. Um
Oh man.
I just yeah. I mean that's my hot take is that you can't just put another ingredient into mayonnaise that flavors it and call it aioli. Aioli is a wholly separate thing. It is not used the same way that we use mayonnaise, and mayonnaise is fine. Mayonnaise can be its own thing, and it doesn't need to be like you don't need to snob it up by giving it a fancy name that is already
Snobbing up
another thing.
mayonnaise.
That's definitely a new sentence. You know what? I'm sorry that I said that. That sounds like some kind of weird, like British slang.
Snobbing up the mayonnaise.
So anyway, I was snubbing up the mayonnaise. Oh my gosh,
It sounds inherently dirty.
it does.
But not necessarily like sexually dirty.
Is
Like
it the snobbing or the
filthy.
mayonnaise that makes it dirty? Because I
I
think
don't
there's a
I don't
good
know.
argument for either half of that
Yeah.
to be the culprit. We are
Oh
leaving this
man.
in.
Oh, of course. I have nothing to say to counter that other than no, not even any other than I got nothing. I
Yeah, it's a valid point, and we need to stop calling stuff aioli.
I mean,
It's
I'm
not.
sure
It's
it's a
just not.
valid point, but I don't think I have anything to say because I'm still stuck on snobbing up the mayonnaise.
Yeah, we don't need to dive any further into that. I think
That
that's
that's
a
gonna be
dark road.
something. I'm gonna wake up in the morning and that phrase is gonna haunt me.
That is going. I know we joke about this, but that is going on merchandise when we start rolling out with
Snobbing
that.
up the mayonnaise. We can sell aioli and just
Oh my
called it
god,
snobbed up mayonnaise.
snobbed up mayonnaise. Oh my god, that's actually not a bad idea.
Did we just make
Um,
$1 million idea? Well, you
yeah, I
mostly.
think so. But
Okay.
hey, you know what? You're my partner.
And you're my
Going on
partner?
record saying 50-50 split.
All right. Sure. All right. Oh man, I need to move on from that or I'm gonna
Yeah.
die.
All right.
Jeez.
So back to our political uh, political
Political hot
hot
takes.
takes.
Why don't you do your last one? Because I don't think my last one is gonna have much to say about it.
Okay. So my last hot take is that I think that things like electricity, water, and even internet access should be publicly funded. I think that in certain instances, especially with internet access, um, you could access a higher tier for an additional rate, but I think there needs to be a base level of specifically water power and essentially Wi-Fi available to every American and paid for by taxes, because realistically, those are necessities that nobody in this country can survive without to some extent.
I like that you add to some extent because I will say, like, you can survive without the internet. In this day and age,
Yeah,
it's
you can be
hard.
homeless. You can be homeless and you can not have any of those. But
Well, I would even say, I mean, it depends on your job or what jobs you're going for. I would say that
right,
that is getting harder and harder.
yeah,
Um, and as a teacher who taught through COVID, I had a number of students who had no internet, and the
yeah,
school
and
provided internet for them.
we parked buses out in neighborhoods for underserved students to make
Oh,
sure that
cool.
they had Wi-Fi. Um, I mean that's not Oregon. That was nationwide. School districts were doing that. So we do have the ability to provide those things free of charge. At least to the extent like, and I'm not talking about, 300 megabyte download
Right.
speeds so that you can game and not have any lag. I'm talking about like, you know, 25 to
Basic,
50
just a connection to do.
megabytes per second.
Yeah.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
so that kids can go to school. You can telecommute to your job. You can, uh, look up recipes that are healthy and cheap, so you don't have to just buy the first thing that you see at the store, and that kind of thing.
So my counter to that, specifically about internet, would be public libraries.
Right.
That's my first counter to that, is that we kind of already do that through public libraries.
Yeah, but that's so inconvenient, and I think that when I mean we could have town wells, and you could get your water from a town well. Do you want to do that? Would you do that if the town well was free? Would you forego that no matter how like financially destitute you are? That would kind of be the last option that you would pick, right?
Yeah, but at the same time, you're basically providing a town well by providing a base level of internet for everybody.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's just that convenience. I mean, no, you're providing a town well by having the library. It's this thing that people can access, but it's not necessarily reliable depending on the patronage of the library and the volume that they see. B, it's inconvenient, and um, so what the inspiration for this was for me was that my here in Corvallis, I think it is the case that property taxes can't be raised. Like there's a moratorium on raising property taxes. So a lot of fees, like obviously sewer, but also like public land use fees, fees to fund the fire department, the police department, different public services, those get attached to my water bill. So my meter on my last bill, my water meter read 800
Mm-hmm.
at the beginning of the period. At the end of the period, my water bill still read 800. So I virtually did not use any water. I think my total usage was about 22 cents. I still paid $90 for my water bill just to have the luxury of having my house hooked up to water. And
So,
that's a
yeah,
basic human need that everyone needs. If I didn't have that, I couldn't even flush my toilet.
right. And so I've got I've got some interesting experiences with this, and I will agree with you on this one because like when I was a missionary in Poland, there were a number of people I met who either had to share a bathroom with everybody on the floor of their apartment or just didn't have one.
Mm-hmm.
I had a guy I met who didn't have a bathroom or access to one, and so he did number one in his kitchen sink, and he saved number two for when he was in public and could go to a public restroom like at church.
Yeah.
Um, and so I agree that there needs to be some level of public access to it. My only problem here is that whether you're paying for it privately or it's publicly funded, you're still paying for it. It just is going to come through taxes.
Yeah. But
And
I think that then it's at least I think it's, you wouldn't have the situation where I am paying the same amount for water as, say, a business owner with a successful business in,
sure.
the same town, who is, like utilizing a lot more of the resources. I'm not paying, you know, a larger percentage of my paycheck as the people that are really utilizing the resource
Yeah.
because just the base fee is so high.
I would also say I'm not sure if nationwide that would be 100% feasible just
No, yeah,
because right.
yeah,
So
I'm in a unique situation.
well, no. I don't just mean your situation. I mean publicly funding water.
Mhm.
Because, I mean, how that means the government now has to do something to get water to people like out in butt freaking nowhere, Kansas. Right.
I mean, they kind of already are.
No, a lot of those people are on wells or have their own
Well,
connection to
yeah.
irrigation. And then let's think about places like in Grants
Well, then you
Pass,
get a
no,
tax
Klamath
credit.
Falls. Sure. That and okay, that's a good solution to that. But let's think of also places like Klamath Falls, right? People still to this day get shot in Klamath Falls over water rights because there's just it's becoming less and less. You've got the
Yeah,
Colorado River drying up because too many people are using water and governments are cutting back. Thankfully,
yeah.
states are agreeing to cut back usage. Um,
Have you seen that time lapse of like Lake Mead in the
yeah, I
last 50
have.
years? That's depressing.
Yeah, it is. It is. And so I do think that something should be done, and some of those solutions would be easier if the federal government had a monopoly over it. But at the same
Mhm.
time, I'm scared of the federal government having a monopoly over the nation's water. Because let's just say Texas decides to, you know, pass a law that the federal government disagrees with, and they can just press a button and cut Texas's water off.
I mean, I think nature already did that to Texas with their power grid, being the only power grid in the United States that is completely privately run, and they had a little bit of a cold snap, and their entire power grid went down.
Okay, but
So I don't think the government could do any worse than that.
but we're looking at us. You're taking my example, which was meant to be a general example, and being specific
Mhm.
with it, which is fine. That's my
Well, also
mistake.
there's a little bit of ad absurdum there.
Right, exactly. So, but I mean, let's say Oregon passes a law that a conservative federal government dislikes, they shut off Oregon's water, right? That's I don't even if the chances of that
I
happening are
don't think you would
minimal.
be able to do that though, because I think that the fact that like if this were to be enacted, you would be recognizing that this is a fundamental human right, and so in the same way, like you couldn't, uh, like there's no way that you could have the federal government or state government uh, shut down people's voting rights. I mean, you can have them do things that are attempting to do that, like
Sure.
having, you know, uh, valid like picture ID in order to vote, like some states are doing. But once you recognize that the only way that this would work is if these things were recognized as human rights
Yeah.
in the context of the necessity for a thriving person in today's society. And I think at the point where you do recognize them as human rights, you don't really have the ability to just use them as a political bargaining chip or as an ultimatum.
My only problem here, then, because I think you've made some really good points and you're convincing me. Um, my only remaining problem here would be the slowness that comes with the federal government for solutions. I mean, let's
Yeah.
look at Flint, Michigan, how long that took.
Oh,
And
I don't even think that's still resolved.
I just Googled it. It is. The
Is it
boil
really?
water, yeah, the boil filtered water advisory is now lifted effective 10:15 a.m. February 13th, 2023. That is on
Still,
the
when
City
did
of Flint website.
that is still shocking.
Yeah. And my big problem with some of these issues is not that I don't think things like this shouldn't happen. It's I'm not sure that the government is the best vehicle for them to happen.
Right, but the alternative is private companies, and again, with Texas, we've seen how well that goes
Well, and some
because
private
private
companies, yes,
companies
have
have a vested interest in making money and
true.
therefore cutting corners. The federal government doesn't necessarily have that same interest in making as large of a profit.
Well, without turning this too much into a debate over centralizing economics, which is essentially
Yeah,
what that comes down to,
yeah,
is I mean that's kind of the purpose of the federal government then is to regulate and make sure that they don't take advantage of it. And as a libertarian, I'll say like that is the idea that I would be okay with, a private company or group, several, ideally as many as possible private companies that can provide those services. I mean, heck,
yeah.
my small town 30 miles outside of Indianapolis has 3 or 4 different trash removal companies, right?
Right.
And so if you don't like the one that you're doing now, I mean, I have a friend who just looked at his bill and was like, all these wacko fees, nah, I'm going somewhere else. Because he can, and they're
Yeah.
still government funded, they're still government regulated, but they provide the same service at different levels. Um, and I don't know that a fully run government trash removal company would be easy to get a hold of because, on one hand, yes, these
Yeah.
private companies have a incentive first and foremost to make money, but they also have an incentive first and foremost to make money. And so if there's competition, then you're going to go somewhere else, right? I mean, how many people are moving from Comcast to AT&T just because of the customer service?
I mean, I'm actively looking at moving from Comcast to just Verizon internet.
Right. I mean, I have
But
Comcast
but
right now, and that's only because AT&T wasn't available in my area.
same thing with me and Verizon. But I think I think a better comparison um is healthcare right now.
Sure.
So there are, if you're under your state plan, there are, various approved insurance providers that you can sign up with under you know, the state rate for the public health care. Um, I think specifically with healthcare, I think a single payer system is what I would like to see. But I think the only way that you could do it for something like water or um, internet access, I think the way that the healthcare system is currently being run would be the only way to feasibly do that. Where you exactly what you said, you have vetted companies who can provide a base rate for everyone in the area, and if you want to spend more money to get a better package or something, you can, but everyone still has the basics of what they need,
So I
and
agree.
everyone is also still paying into that.
I agree. And I think for me, it comes down to competition, right? Because
Mm.
my problem with a single payer healthcare system is that it gets rid of competition. And so you look at some of these
No, it
countries that
doesn't. Competition just doesn't become about money. It becomes based on quality of
services,
service.
right? But what I'm getting at here is if you look at the way our system is run, costs
Mhm.
continually rise up because the insurance companies make it worse, harder and harder and harder for doctors to get their money.
Yeah.
But if you look at some of these other countries that have a single payer healthcare system, it is also harder to get access when in a timely manner. So the difference is
Yeah.
you can get, I could go to somewhere to see a specialist for just about anything almost immediately. The question is, can I pay for it? Right? Whereas
No,
in some of these,
see, here's the flaw. A, no, you can't. It's going to take you, even if you go to urgent care in certain places. I went to urgent care for my flesh-eating parasite.
yeah,
Um, it's just a scar. Don't worry. Um, it
actually, I'm
took
so concerned I'll
me
catch it through the video
to
camera.
yeah. Well, no, just if people are squeamish. Um, it took me like 2.5 hours of waiting just for urgent care.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Also, reports of, I mean, I've heard reports of like people in Canada having to wait absorbent amounts of time to see like their general practitioner,
Sure.
but those are highly localized and sensationalized.
Agreed.
And I think both both assertions that it, I mean, yes, it would take more time if everyone has access to healthcare and we don't have the infrastructure or the labor to maintain the amount of the volume of patients that doctors are currently seeing, yeah, it's going to take a little longer. You know what I would really rather a lot more than paying $50,000 for a medication? Waiting 2.5 hours to see a doctor, and that medication is provided for free.
Right. And I'm not going to say that there's anything wrong with that. I think you're absolutely right with that. But I think what we want here is the same goal, but different methods of achieving it. Right? Because
Okay.
I would say we could make it easier for, if we're using the same healthcare comparison, we can make it easier for smaller insurance companies to provide those services. If we're
Sure.
looking
If their
outside of,
services are up to the quality
right,
that can compete with larger services.
right, and you could look at other industries like make it easier for small time dairies, make it easier for small time mechanic shops, make it just small
Mhm.
businesses in general need to have an easier time to function so that they can compete with their larger competitors that kind of have
Yeah.
monopolies. And that would drive a lot of costs down. It would drive a lot of services forward, whether it's Medicare or anything, because now suddenly United Healthcare, which is notoriously the worst one from a doctor's side, they
Mhm.
try and find anything they can to not pay, has to compete with a mom and pop insurance company that will pay anything immediately. And that's how their services, that's their competition saying, hey, doctors like
Yeah,
working with us.
but their
So,
premiums need to be a lot higher for them to be able to compete and make money.
one, that's where the government
So the whole
regulation,
system, yes, yeah,
that's where the
government,
government
like,
regulation comes in.
yeah,
And that could come in the form of like tax cuts or credits for smaller companies, smaller businesses. That could, I mean, there's a number of
to
different ways that you
offset
could do that,
costs.
right, to
Yeah.
offset those costs. And I think that is I don't want to say better because I'm not an expert on this, but I would say that's a similar way to accomplish the similar goal without having to
Okay, yeah,
100% overhaul our system.
right. But I think you and I are both agreeing that there needs to be a systemic change in how we provide these services, whether it's healthcare, whether it's water, whether it's food, whether it's
Right.
access to Wi-Fi. There needs to be a systemic change in how people are getting access to that and the cost and how it's funded.
And I think this is one of the things that a lot of Republicans and Democrats agree on, but don't know that they agree on. Because
Right.
you look at a lot of Democrats and they're all like, buy local, buy this. And, it's because a lot of people will say, oh, it's just because they're hippy dippy and they're like, buy local fruit, buy local vegetables. But you look at Republicans and they're like, support your mom and pop grocery store, support your mom and pop mechanic
Yeah.
shop. It's the same thing. You're
Yeah.
supporting a local small business to drive that competition, to support this stronger economy and drive down prices, right?
Right.
It's the same thing. I see that from both sides, and I just wish people would focus on things they agree on more. All right, well, thank you for listening to Agreeable Disagreements. I have been Cameron. This has been Andrew, and I want all of you to remember that Australia is wider than the moon. Thanks for listening.
Bye.